Hey everyone, we have some great news today, and that is that Nintendo has come out now to officially state that they don't see any differences on Switch in terms of indie games and AAA. What they're essentially saying is that they don't view them in this general sphere that a lot of gamers do, where gamers kind of view AAA games as these upper echelon behemoths, and indie games are like these small games that don't really matter that much. And there's a lot of people out there that kind of feel that same way. Now, obviously, there's a huge crowd of people that buy indie games. There's a huge crowd of people that buy AAA games. But Nintendo doesn't think there needs to be a difference between them. They think all video games should essentially be treated equal, especially on their platform. And they actually had a lot of interesting things to say about this. So Yasuki Soejima and Park Masashi led the way for Nintendo's indie efforts when it comes to Japan. And they were interviewed in a couple of interviews, and they had a lot to say about the indie scene, the AAA scene, and how Nintendo is approaching this on Switch. Masahashi told Entertainment Station, "On Nintendo platforms, we don't really differentiate between AAA titles from established firms and indie games. In actuality, they're lined up as equals in the Nintendo eShop. We don't specially promote indie games just because they are indie games. And conversely, we don't prioritize them below AAA titles either." More than that, Soejima and Masahashi also stated the following when asked about the prospects for future of Nintendo indie games. Soejima says, "First of all, we just want to get developers on board with developing for our platform when they decide what to develop games for. It's not really a goal per se, but before Switch really got going, when we would see trailers or posters at events, the platforms that would always be shown at the end were almost always companies' machines. There was really nowhere where you would see the 3DS or Wii U supported. It was absolutely a situation where we weren't even seen as a practical option. It was here that we thought we'd like to have the Switch's logo up there with the other companies." Park went on to say, "Fortunately, Nintendo has seen international success, and I think the opportunities for us to be a viable platform have increased. Going forward, we'd like to maintain our momentum and become a platform developers make content for, from the beginning of development as a matter of course, alongside the others. Looking at a more long-term idea, it's not something just the two of us can do on our own, but there's a cycle we would like to see the entire industry work to support, of indie developers being able to easily produce titles, get a real ROI from them, and then easily move on to the next title with other new developers following their example to enter the industry." Soejima then responded, "If a given title sells really well, then it can be recognized as its own IP, and it would be great if such an IP can go on to last in the industry and be accepted by consumers. The entire game industry, not just Nintendo, needs to think about how to increase the number of titles born from the indie game scene. Lastly, I just want to say that while indie games tend to be associated with the digital world, we've learned that as a community, it is actually incredibly analog. It's a scene that emphasizes connections between people, and that's something we want to place an importance on as well." So you can see, obviously, these people are, massively on the indie side of things at Nintendo, so they're going to have all these favorable opinions on indie titles in general. But I like their general messaging here. They want to make these indie titles get a return on investment, quickly turn around, become their own IPs, become this big thing on Switch's platform, and they also want Switch to start being taken, and Nintendo's platforms in general, but specifically Switch, given the respect other platforms are given, both from AAA developers and indie developers. Instead of just being a thing you toss on at the end of a trailer, how about being this thing you actually announce at the same time that you announce your game? We know right now that Switch is well known for getting late ports, even of indie games, right? Late ports of indie games like Stardew Valley, or late ports of AAA games. Payday 2 that comes out in a week, as just an example. Doom, Bayonetta 1 and 2, obviously that was a Wii U port, but it's known for getting these later ports of these third-party games, and really, Nintendo wants to start being like, no, we want you guys thinking of Switch from day one when you start development on new games. There is some understanding for games that started before Switch hit the market, but now that Switch is on the market, any new games moving forward, whether it be indie or AAA, Nintendo really wants their brand to be associated with those games day one. It creates better marketing for Nintendo, and it's obviously better for the consumers as well. And all of us, I think, as Switch owners can say, yes, please, we want day and date releases that were developed at the same time, so all versions are equal. I think that's what everybody would like as a Switch owner. I know that's what I would like. And I am also thankful that Nintendo on the whole seems to have this general opinion that indie games are no different than AAA. They are just as important. And we've seen this just in how they're treating, indie titles on the platform. How many indie games have already released, in physical form? I could think of just off the top of my head, I know Has Been Heroes has come out as a physical copy. Rhyme came out as a physical copy. The Binding of Isaac Afterbirth Plus came out as a physical copy. And so many other indie titles are doing that. So it's not just like this digital thing anymore. Nintendo feels these games are just as important to their catalog, to their library on Switch, as the big AAA titles are. And I personally am excited by this. I've been saying this all the time, and I'd even like to see this barrier go further in gaming. John, don't just tear down the general perception that there's a huge difference between AAA and indie games in terms of game quality and you're a superior gamer if you play AAA games, or you're a more intelligent gamer if you play indie titles, vastly superior indie titles. No, I'd like to see that barrier torn down there, and I'd also like to see the barrier torn down with gamers between these games and then mobile games, because I hate how quickly so many gamers dismiss the mobile game scene, like on smart devices, just because maybe they don't like the business practices, or they think it's too puzzle-oriented. Hello, puzzle games existed forever. Tetris is one of the biggest games in the history of gaming, and it's a puzzle game. I don't know. I just like to see barriers torn down, and I'm glad to see that Nintendo is kind of putting themselves at the forefront of saying, look, we don't think that there's a difference between AAA and indie, and if you look at our eShop, if you look at our store shelves, we're not going to be treating those games differently. We're going to be giving all games an equal shot for success on our platform. That's kind of the messaging I see here, whether it's a Nintendo-made game, a AAA game from a third party, or an indie title. All of them get equal treatment, and this is especially true if you go on the eShop, and then you're just starting to scroll through things. You'll see recent releases. They're not based on which game is the big AAA game is right up front. No, it's based on release date. It's based on what time of the day that came out. So you have multiple games released in one day. What time do those games release in the eShop? That's how they're listed. There's no difference. They don't even label them as indie games in the eShop. They don't label them as AAA games. You could look up by genre, separate by genre. You look up recent. You can look up best-selling. You could look up games on sale. Everything is treated as the same, and I appreciate that from Nintendo. I hope more platforms follow suit in the future. It is one of the forward-thinking ideals Nintendo actually has going in their online space and then on store shelves. And I love to see this continue. Kudos to you, Nintendo, for taking this stance and this viewpoint. I couldn't be happier as a Switch owner. Anyways, folks, I'm Nathaniel Rufflejans from Nintendo Prime, and if you like this video, you know what to do. And if you dislike the video, hit that dislike button. Subscribe for more. Hit that bell icon so you get notifications of all of our videos. And you know what, folks? It just feels great to finally be back. Yes, our first news video in over a week. The glory of Nintendo Prime! I'll catch you guys in the next one. The glory of Nintendo Prime. Where do I come up with these things? Seriously. Seriously.